Hey, what's going on, guys? I got a special guest here on the Clockedin podcast. We have Andrew D. Thompson, author of The High Performing Mind. He has spent a lifetime searching for the best ways to empower people to overcome adversity, improve resilience, and consistently bring their best to everything they do so that they can have better results, achieve their goals, and create a lasting improvements in their lives. Andrew, welcome to the Clockedin podcast. When was the first time you thought about a high performing mind?
Well, first of all, Jordan, thanks so much for having me on. It's a pleasure to be here. And that's a great question. And it actually goes back to my childhood. And it wasn't in that terminology, a high performing mind. Not something that came along a lot later in my life. But from a young age, I was always really aware that, the better I performed, the better results I got, and the more success I had in my life, and then kind of the happier and more fulfilled I felt. So yeah, I quickly connected that like when I was playing well, started off with sports as a kid and I had a good game, I was happier. And performance and performing well in those environments was important to me. So that's when I kind of got onto this whole idea of like, okay, like, look, if I perform better in my relationships, I have better relationships. If I perform better at school, I get better results. My parents are happier with me. And it kind of spread around all areas of my life. And that habit of always doing my best started in pretty young. And as I got older, I applied it to, whatever it was that I was doing. Like I always just took the approach, like I want to do my best. I had kids not too long ago and, I want the best for my kids. So I try to be the best I can as a dad. It's whatever area that is important to you that you kind of apply those principles to.
Absolutely. Congratulations on the children. And it's exciting. It's an
Yeah.
exciting time. But even more though, it's that idea of showing up when you're at a place. So like there's so many of us that go food shopping and we're like in a million different places, but if we were the best ones to show up as a food shopper, we'd get so much more joy out of that experience. It's the same thing with sports, it's the same thing with our job, it's the same thing with sales, it's the same thing with podcasts. So whatever you're doing, like you go to the gym, you know the people who go to the gym and then just talk the whole time. And they're like, I was at the gym for 3 hours. I don't know why I didn't lose weight. And it's like, you, if you showed up, you could be in there for 30 minutes and get out. Like, as long as you're giving your best and being there very present in those moments. So, for you, when did you need to utilize this attribute? And when did you realize that it was a unique skill? Because I feel like a lot of the time growing up, you're like, oh, no, everyone just tries their best. And then you start to realize there's those kids who go, I didn't study at all and got a B, but like you had to try really hard and got an A. So it becomes this thing of like, oh, we don't care. But like, how did you get into really recognizing that you had a uniqueness here and that not everyone was applying themselves like you were?
Well, I mean, I don't know that it was a special quality, and I never really thought of it as like something that is innate in me, but I guess it was. It really started like one message from my dad, one, piece of advice consistently over the years from my dad was to always work hard. And that was where everything started for me. So like when I went out and played soccer as a kid, the first sport that I kind of got into in hockey, ice hockey here in Canada, uh, that was my first kind of mission was to like work as hard as I could and like try to get the best results I could. And as I mentioned in the earlier question, I tied that together. Working hard kind of led to better performance. Better performance led to better results and more success, and then feeling just better about my life and the way it was going in general. So yeah, it's not like a unique quality. I mean, okay, for sure, I am a person who goes out and gives 100%. That is undeniable. I've been like that pretty young, but anybody can learn it. I think that's the important part of the equation. And it doesn't necessarily come overnight. I remember coaching a high performance athlete not many years ago, super talented, but just had that inability to kind of push to that next level. So like results and success was always limited. And so I started this athlete on a program where like I had him do like a self-assessment, like what would you rate yourself out of 10 in terms of your effort level kind of thing. And I think the assessment was like a 7, and I think I would have put it personally more around a 4. And so the goal was to like get him to a 5 and then eventually to a 6 and then a 7 and so on. But not to do it like overnight or in a few days, but gradually over time so that each level felt normal and natural. So
Yeah.
when he was, because if he went to an 8, he could do an 8, but maybe sustain it for a few minutes and then like, oh my God, that was
Yeah.
too much. I don't want to do that again. Or that's just too hard. But if you go from a 4 to a 5 to a 6 and slowly over months get yourself to that 9 or 10 out of 10 level of commitment and effort and focus, then it's much more sustainable. I think people say the same for weight loss. You try to do it too quickly and it doesn't stick. Same for this. If you are a person who has trouble giving, effort and applying themselves and bringing their full 100% focus to things, then don't try to get to a 10 out of 10 right away. Just build it slowly over time. And as you do that, your results will start to improve right away. So you get that instant feedback, which is really affirming. And then gradually over months, you can get to the point where you are giving that total 100%. So yeah, getting back to your original question, I guess I've always kind of put my heart into things that I've done, and that brings passion. And when you have
Yeah.
passion for something, it's really easy and natural to give your 100%. So I think that's another way to it, rather than that kind of mental approach of improving incrementally, do that if you need. But also if you choose things that you're just naturally passionate about and that you love, you're going to find that higher level of focus, commitment, and, performance just naturally.
Yeah, yeah. I really like that how it was raising the bar each and every time because we sit there so often and we don't realize that it sounded like to me of like raising your standards. You know what I mean? There's so many of us that sit here and go, that kid or that guy or whoever it was, he sounded like his standard was a 4, even
Yeah.
though he had the athletic ability to cover for it. So it kind of was like, okay, and no one really ever really pushed him. So when you raise your standard a little bit, it forces you to do more and it forces you to do a little more and do a little more and do a little more. And you start to realize this and start to see what you're really capable of. And that's why people don't realize they overthink about a year, but in a decade they underestimate what they can do because they start to see how unrecognizable they can become by continually giving more, doing more, and being more. And I think that's so important. So for you, what ended up happening where you really started to recognize that you had to utilize this skill? Like, where in your life have you started to utilize these like I need to raise my standard because there's so many times where we just get stuck in the mundane and we don't live intentional lives. So it's something where we got to get excited about our life.
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question. Like, so you're asking like, where did I kind of decide that I wanted to, take things to the next level and perform
Yeah,
better? Yeah.
yeah, exactly.
So I
Yeah.
mean, yeah, like I think, early on, as I mentioned earlier, the whole thing about like wanting to perform well in every area of my life and having that come back to me. And I think what's interesting is all that stuff started in sport, and like I said earlier, it spread to other areas of my life. And what one of the main reasons why I wrote this book the way it is now, I always wanted to write a book, but the way I wrote the book now is because of some of the health challenges I went through in my life not that long ago. I guess they started about 8 years ago, 8 or 9 years, yeah, 8 years ago or so. I had a kind of a debilitating unexpected health situation. I was in great health before that. Running 400-meter sprints, 100-meter sprints at the track, still training in my early
Oh wow.
40s to, perform well in sport and whatever, stay healthy and all that stuff, keep up with my kids. And shockingly, 2 weeks later, I would find myself in the ICU, then subsequently bedridden 22 hours a day for the next 4.5 months, unable to work, unable to support my family, thinking I was going to die on a daily basis. Actually, getting to the point where the doctors were wondering if I was going to make it. It was a very traumatic time in my life. And all those things, all those kind of skills that I developed over the years of trying to perform at my best, I really drew on those through that debilitating period to get me through, and that was one of the
Yeah.
primary reasons why I wrote this book, because I realized that these skills and mindsets and habits and approaches to things could be used in any area of your life, to overcome
Yeah.
adversity. We get not sidetracked, the wrong word, but we get unexpected things that come into our life and throw us off and like, threaten our whole existence in a way. And if you can have these skills and apply them to in those areas, it can help you get through. And that's certainly what I did. Like there was a period there when I didn't know how I would get better, or if I would ever be able to walk around and be a normal human being again. So one of the things that I should mention is like, so for example, when I got home from the hospital, I crawled up the stairs to get to my bedroom, and it took me about 45 minutes to recover from that effort. Like
Oh my
far
God.
more than running a 100-meter sprint. It was crazy. So to
Yeah.
go from that extreme of fitness to like this debilitating weakness where, I could barely get out of bed. My son had his 3-year-old birthday at the time, and I couldn't go down the stairs. to celebrate because I was just too weak. If somebody said something to me that was like slightly aggressive or upsetting, I would need a couple hours to recover. It was crazy. You
Oh,
don't
wow.
realize how much having regular energy gets us
Control.
through these things until you don't
Yeah.
have it. Yeah.
Wow. I mean, it's fascinating when you start describing, hey, I did this and I can't do anything for the rest of the day. Like, I'm tired. I'm
Yeah.
because you don't think about it. Like, I'm standing right now during this interview and I'm like, wait a second, what am I gonna be too tired? Like, it becomes crazy things where you start to realize that the body actually does, and we should all be in a place of gratitude where there is so much that our body does do for us. So, what were your thoughts going through all that? Because I can only imagine someone who's pushing it at 40, like in good health, in good spirits, doing well, working, and then to be bedridden, like that's 180, if not
It was,
more.
yeah, it was terrifying. I mean, the thought of not being able to support your family, that's a sense of responsibility that, you carry consciously or unconsciously. So that was obviously weighing on me really heavily. I mean, I went through utter despair, depression. I didn't know if I would ever recover again. So it was, I think I cried every day for the first few months. It was such a huge amount of loss in my life. The things that I loved most were all instantly removed. I couldn't
Yeah,
exercise. I couldn't play sports anymore. I couldn't look after
yeah,
my family. I couldn't go to work. Like it was crazy. Like, and just wondering what the next day would bring. And so, yeah, I went through all those emotions and slowly but surely, and it's something I talk about a lot in a high performing mind, I started to replace negative thoughts with positive actions. So, what can I do to kind of step myself out of this? And one of the first things I started with was a diet because I started to realize that, there was a lot of variability in how I felt. Some days I had these crazy, and it wasn't just tired, it was weakness. It was like unable
yeah.
to like lift my arms.
Oh, wow.
So it was, so diet, I started to use diet. First of all, I went through the medical system and went saw 10 doctors, specialists, and none of them really had a good idea of what was going on. They did figure out eventually what was happening, like what was happening in my body and why I was experiencing it. It was essentially a low phosphate thing, which phosphate is a mineral in your body that basically creates a lot of your energy, particularly energy for moving at like more intense levels. So if you're moving quicker, phosphate is plays a role in that. So they discovered that my body wasn't absorbing phosphate correctly anymore, and they tried everything and nothing really worked. So eventually, I said I got to crawl out of this hole by myself, and I started to use diet to do that. And so what I did was like a computer programmer. I basically took the 12 things that I ate on a daily basis, and I changed out one at a time until I started to figure out like and see how I reacted to that. Oh, this day I had a little bit better energy. This day I had a little bit worse energy, and by going through that process, I was able to come up with a diet slowly over the next year and a half that allowed me to go from like 2 hours of work a day to 3 to 4 to eventually being able to work close to full days after about a year and a half, and then about 5 years to recover in total. So, anyways, this diet really got me there and got me to the point where I can now do, I have this condition. I don't know if I'll always have it, but, I can exercise again, which is a huge change from where
Oh,
I
wow.
was. But I
Yeah,
just have to be a bit careful about that. Some days it's fine, and other days I just have to be a little bit more mindful. So, but yeah, I took the negative thoughts and all the negative emotions I was going through, and I used them to propel me to find solutions and walk myself out of the situation I found myself in. And that's a really powerful way to deal with adversity because if you get stuck in the negative thinking indefinitely, I mean, that can lead to terrible things. So
yeah.
ultimately, our goal is to get back on track and live a great life. And I've just learned to apply myself in different ways. And obviously, I've got this book going now. That's a big priority, and it all goes from there.
100%. And like you said, using the negative energy to propel you forward to find the different solutions. And when you sat there, you started describing the food. And I was sitting there and I'm like, oh, he gamified it. He made it a game. No, because I'm like you're sitting there, you don't have a lot of energy. You start to make it a game where it's like, hey, I feel better here. Hey, I feel better here. Hey, this is better. Instead of sitting there, nothing works, never gonna be a solution. You start testing things out and you measure and monitor what improves. Now, the funny thing is, you do that with business it explodes. You do that with a book, it explodes. You do that with everything in our lives. Like that idea of testing and iterating to see what improves, we need to use it all times. And that's why data, you got to measure and monitor. Like you want to lose weight, find a scale that you can step on once a week and evaluate, did you do better or did you do worse? And it's these little things. Or even like your anything. Like you can track your money, you can track everything. So that measure and monitoring thing is massive, massive,
Honestly, true.
massive.
So true. I mean, it's a great point. Sorry to interrupt you there, but in chapter 7, I talk about explore, experiment, and fail your way to excellence or greatness. And that's exactly what you're talking about. And I like that you turned it, use the words gamify. That's pretty cool. I hadn't heard it expressed that way before, but it works well. And so, yeah, I mean, when you want to excel in life, like you kind of got to distinguish yourself in some way. Like, mediocrity isn't getting that $200,000 a year job. You got to do something. And when you excel at things, those are the things that get rewarded in life. So, um, you know, I would take, this book process just because it's top of mind right now. I'm doing a lot of experimenting with like marketing, what works, what doesn't, throwing things at the wall, see what sticks, what doesn't. I'm failing a lot, but I'm learning as I go, and slowly I'm getting better and more efficient, and spending my marketing dollar a little bit more wisely. So it is a really valuable part of the process to be willing to explore and experiment and try things out, see what works, because we don't really know. And I think there's so much more value and power in that than like learning necessarily by going on and Googling everything, because that was someone else's solution. Like ultimately at the end of the day, I really want to direct people back to like learning themselves, even when
Yes.
when I coach high performing athletes, you have a general idea of what works. I've been doing it for 2 decades, and I've helped people go from like the amateur level to the professional level many times and become a top level performer on a world kind of level. And you got to kind of figure out that athlete, like what worked for one doesn't work for another. One eats in the
Yes.
morning and gives them great energy, doesn't necessarily work for someone else. So it's the same with yourself. Like you got to learn your own business. Your business is unique. Even if it's
Yes.
something that 1,000 other people are doing, you're doing it your own unique way. So you've got to learn yourself. And by going through that process of experimenting, learning from it, putting in the hours, putting in the time, becoming a master of your craft, then you eventually get to the point where you can excel. And
Yes.
that's really the kind of the step towards, improving and reaching your goals and ultimately succeeding the way you want.
Yes, yeah. And I have a mentor of mine. He's 79 years old and he talks about that concept of know thyself. And he says he's like, you're never doing any project. Like, you might be doing a podcast, you might be writing a book, you might be doing whatever that is in your life, the audience. But like, what you're really doing is learning about who you are as an individual and what you enjoy and what's something that's good and what are because you might really enjoy the book writing process, but the marketing process is different. Like there's pros and cons to everything. And the more we learn about ourselves, the more we can make better decisions or more informed decisions in the future. Like it's crazy. People will go, yeah, I want to go to this restaurant. Why? Because I really like it. Good. At least you know what you like. Because most people will sit there and go, I don't know all the time. And it's that taking inventory and realizing how you can improve and see what are the different areas that allow you to be successful, I think are really the keys.
Yeah, I love that. Like, I love the whole concept of like self-development and self-mastery. I feel like those ideas have been lost a little bit. Like, if you put time into yourself and you develop yourself, you go to the gym, like you're stronger, and you use that in every area of your life, and it creates more resilience. So you're not just physically stronger, you're emotionally stronger as well, and mentally stronger because you got to push through those reps and squeeze out that last set and all that. So yeah, it really goes a long way towards helping you achieve your goals. So, by trying to develop yourself and putting that time in yourself, you get more benefits. You become more capable in many different ways wherever you're trying to develop yourself. And like self mastery is the same thing. When you master yourself and you know how you work and you know how what it takes for you to excel and succeed, then you can apply that to everything in your life, right? You can apply it to your relationships, you can apply it to your business, your career, your pursuits, whatever that is. So yeah, it goes a long way for sure.
100%. I completely agree because there's a few different things I was thinking about as you were going through that. And one of them is this idea of, okay, you want to excel in life. Like, what are some of the ways you can do that with your relationships? You know what I mean? When you sit there and realize that It's funny, like people give gifts on a birthday, and on a birthday they try to give you the biggest gift. But the thing is, if I gave someone a gift on not their birthday, but maybe 3 months before their birthday when no one's giving them attention, they'll be so caught off guard, the gift can be exponentially smaller and they'll be super appreciative of it. So it's that idea of like, how are you consistently watering your relationships? Like, how are you consistently helping these people out or providing value or doing something of the sort to make you feel better? Because I think by giving to others, like, to give you an example, I have this credit card, and the credit card gives me. I hope the people who receive it aren't listening to this. They might be. Um, so the credit card I have, it gives me Dunkin' Donuts gift cards. Like I can spend $7 at Dunkin' and I get money back. Like they'll refund me. It's part of my like fee each year or whatever. So I don't use Dunkin'. So I just send it to the people that I know use Dunkin' and they get a thank you. I feel good about it because now I'm getting some of the money back, and it's just this little easy way of like making people feel good once a month, and it doesn't cost me anything. Or in my head, it doesn't cost me anything. It's like these little things of like, how do you make people feel good? You know, like what are the things you can do? But for you with the high performing mind, like what are some of the other characteristics you realized are pivotal, pivotal for people to be successful and really enjoy that life experience.
I mean, there's so many. I mean, you've got to be resilient. You've got to be able to set your goals and make sure they're positively framed and that you're driving towards them and not inadvertently in the direction you don't want to go. You gotta not take things personally because there's gonna be people who are gonna say things to you along the way that are gonna make you feel discouraged and like giving up and quitting. I've seen athletes, great athletes have, a random person in the crowd and come out and criticize them and then it throws them off. So you got to be able to not take things personally. You got to be willing to always bring your best to the equation we talked about earlier, but also you got to be able to perform at your best. And performing at your best is a skill in itself that you need to develop over time. Like if you go in and you bomb that interview, it's not going to necessarily get you that job. But if you go and you perform really well in that interview, then you got a much better chance, right? So performing at your best is a key part of like succeeding in everything that you do. If you don't give any effort to a relationship, like look, you're doing all those nice things for your friends. If you don't make that effort, people don't feel it, then what happens over time. So making that effort and going and taking it to the next level and bringing your best to the equation are key parts of that equation.
Absolutely. And one of the things about being the best for the situation, I think, is is our like sleep patterns and our scheduling and how we set up our life. And I remember literally last night it was like 10 o'clock and I had a workout class at 6 a.m. And Madison was my wife was like, "Oh, let's stay up and watch like finish the movie." And I'm like, "No. Like, no, we're not spending another 40 minutes doing this." Because I'm like, if I stay up too late, then I'm gonna be tired throughout the next day, and then I have a big day, and I don't want to not perform well. Like, so there's little things where you make these internal decisions like the day before, and you make these processes, or even the 2 days before, 3 days before. So my point being is
Yeah.
like, if you're gonna show up for things, you have to be super
Yes.
intentional, and that's how you're able to get the best results. And also, like Andrew, you hold a high standard for people. Like you want people to show up and be prepared and know what's going on and all of that stuff. So it forces people to go, okay, like if I'm going to show up for this, then I need to do this research, this research, this research. And by the way, people, I'm sharing all these examples so that you can realize that it part of it is just showing up, but part of it is also doing the work that's required. So like
Yeah.
if you're like whatever you want in your life, if you are working towards that mission, you will be able to get there with the intentionality. But it
Well, you
just
did
takes a lot of time.
so true. And you just talked about two of them. I'm not sure if you're aware of it, but you talked about discipline and you talked about self-restraint. So I love that, the day before, oh, if I stay up too late, and then I'm not gonna, go to the gym tomorrow necessarily. And with an athlete, that'll be like, oh, I won't perform at my best, right?
Yeah.
So that's a key part of it too. And I talk about that in one of the chapters as well. And then of course, you asked me earlier, what are some of the things that go into it? Well, discipline is a big part of it, right? If you don't have, and by discipline, what it's all about is about doing something on a daily basis. So if you do something on a daily basis, you can create something amazing by going through that process. And discipline is a big part of that. And that's the ability just to wake up every day and go, you know what, I'm going to go to the gym every day. I'm going to get stronger and I'm going to perform better in my sport. Or I'm going to, every day when I go into work, I'm going to make sure I say hello to everybody who works there to, let them know that I care and that I'm there to support them and have a few words. And that goes a long way into like becoming a better leader and to being perceived as a great leader by those you work with. So and to earn their trust and confidence and all those important things by connecting with them on a daily basis. So making those efforts on a daily basis are huge, and discipline is a big part of that. So we all need to have a little bit of discipline. And I talk about different types of discipline. Some people were just born with discipline. Maybe I was born that way. I'm a little bit lucky. Maybe I inherited it from my parents. I don't know. But if you don't have discipline, it doesn't mean that you can't ever succeed. It means you just need to build it, and you build it slowly. So I call it dirty discipline, where you start, maybe you do it a couple days and you don't for a little while. And then you're like, oh yeah, I need to get back on track. And you maybe do it for 3 days instead of two the next time. And then maybe you string 5 days together. And eventually, before you know it, you actually have a habit, and that creates your daily discipline. So that's all part of that process. And if you're passionate about it, it's a lot easier to create discipline and create those daily habits. But by doing something every day, you create whatever you're working on, you create like more success for it. So for you with your podcast, the more you put it out there, the more episodes you do, you're building something. It gets bigger and bigger and better, and more people know about it. So that daily effort. And I love that, like I said, I love that example of a little bit of self-restraint goes a long way, right? So if you make those decisions that you place like my success is more important than like that extra uh, piece of cake or
Yeah.
or
No,
staying
I
up
mean,
or
for
staying up
sure.
late.
For sure. And the crazy thing is about that is that it's not that you can't have a piece of cake.
No, it's
It's
not. Yeah.
we view it as the piece of cake is like this huge cake, but it's like no, just take one bite and don't take another bite. Like it's not always as hard as we think it is, but we just do this with ourselves so often where we just go it's zero or hero, and it's no. There's an in between portion for sure. And I think the other big thing you brought up that's super important is the everyday effect. Most people
Yes.
are like, I'm not gymming. I'm not gonna. We've been using the gym a lot as an example, but they're like, I'm not gonna go to the gym on Saturday and Sunday. And I'm like, that's the easiest day to go. That's the day no one else goes. That is why you should go that day because once you get the discipline going, then that's where the momentum builds. Like you shouldn't like one of the biggest things that I found to help me a lot is being able to go to bed at the same time. It sounds crazy, but if you can go to bed at the same time throughout the entire week, you will have a much better life.
Hmm.
Like what ends up happening is a lot of the time you'll end up going to bed, and I'm guilty of this, we all are, but you'll end up almost like you're going into a different time zone, and then your body gets confused, and then it's difficult to handle the next day, and there's a lot of variables to it. But if you're able to go to bed at the same time, wake up at a similar time each day, it makes a world of difference.
Absolutely. Like, I mean, sleep is so important. And it's a funny thing about sleep, but we're not always gonna be able to sleep perfectly either, right? So some days we're
Yeah.
gonna sleep well, some we're not. And sometimes we just have to perform well no matter how that goes, right?
Yes.
So, I mean, I can remember a long time ago, I was playing a tournament back when I played sport professionally. And I was young. I went out with some friends, but I was disciplined. I said, I'm going to go home pretty early and get to bed early. Well, I did get back. Couldn't fall asleep right away. Maybe fell asleep for about 45 minutes and they all rolled in. They had a few too many
Of
drinks
course.
that night. They woke me up. They didn't give a crap, because they were just having a good time. And they stayed up for a couple hours. It was a really small apartment. I couldn't fall asleep. I think I slept like a total of like an hour and a half, which is
Oh, wow.
way beyond what you want to, or, you, experience before going into playing like a final of a competitive event and whatever your sport is. So I had to get my mind out of being so incredibly upset that this happened and that, my sleep was ruined and that like it jeopardized my opportunity to succeed the next day and kind of find a way to perform well anyway. And, I was able to do that. I actually didn't win that particular match, but I did play well. I did perform well. So I couldn't blame it necessarily on not having slept. So what was important to me was that I showed up. I performed at my best. I gave it my all on that day, and I had a pretty good performance. Maybe not my best ever, but I made the best of
And then
a bad situation.
what'd you do exactly? Because yeah, what did you do to get in the zone, basically?
Well,
Like,
I mean, you gotta like start with all those negative thoughts and emotions that are pulling you down and easy to get caught up in and just go and give up, right? Depressed, can't do it. I'm gonna be a failure. This is gonna be embarrassing. It's gonna be horrible. Okay, you get that out of your system, but then positive actions. All right, I'm going to like go for a little jog, see if I can help myself feel better. I'm going to just get in a more positive frame of mind. And those are the first steps, right? But then when you get there, it comes down to like, how are you going to perform your best in that moment? Like peak performance, flow. We've heard all those terms in the past, right? So how are you going to get yourself closer to that? And it all comes down to what I describe in the book as present moment focus. So you got to get really tuned into the here and now in this moment so that you can perform at your best and then bring that focus and don't think about anything else than other than what your goal is. I want to perform, I want to play. It was a racket sport I was competing in at the time. And I want to play this rally to the best of my ability. Okay,
Yeah.
that rally's now over. Okay, now this rally, the next one. This is all that exists. How am I going to try to win this particular point? And by bringing
Yeah.
that 100% focus into that moment, you perform at your best for whatever your best is in that moment and on that day, right?
Yeah.
So it's way better than if you're like, oh yeah, what am I gonna have for dinner later on? Or or you keep checking your phone, or I can't believe that person said that to me. That stuff. You're throwing away your mental resources instead of using 100% focus in the moment. You got 20% thinking about that, unfortunate conversation you had earlier in the day or upsetting conversation you had earlier in the day. 20% thinking about what you got to do later on or what you're gonna eat or whatever that distraction is. And you're only then bringing like 30 or 40% to your performance. But we've got
Yes.
to block all those things out, focus in the moment, and bring 100% of ourselves emotionally, mentally, and physically to what we're doing. And that's the gateway into the zone or flow, whatever people want to call it, and performing at your best. And that's what you want to do when you're, in a job interview, on a
Yes.
podcast,
Yeah.
performing in sport, or having that big pitch when you're presenting to that $1 million client that's going to change your business experience for the rest of your life. That's what you got to do. Bring your 100% mental focus to the here and now, and be focused on what you're doing.
100%. And one of the things I got from that is, so I went to a Tony Robbins conference a few years back, and one of the activities he does is called like it's priming, and it's
Yeah.
basically this activity of like getting your body in motion. And what it reminded me of is like when I played high school football, and everyone would get pumped up, they get excited, they get ready to go. And when I started to realize when you get into the work world, a lot of people don't do that. Like they don't get excited, they don't get the endorphins up. So I'm just
Mhm.
sharing this so the audience can realize that like before I go on any podcast, I literally do my thing is like I do 10 push-ups, then I hit my chest and I do like a let's go thing so that I can get myself, because an object in motion is staying in motion. And you start to realize that as you're moving, you're able to do more of these things. Like the other big thing I did was I got a standing desk probably like 6 months to a year ago. Why? Because I felt that I was lower energy in the chair. And I'm like, I gotta get up. Like if I'm not, like you gotta get excited. And it's how do you recreate these things in a very easy and accessible way? Because when it's not easy and accessible, it doesn't happen.
Oh, it's so true. I love that you use the example of Tony Robbins. I got to tell you, he's the one who got me into that whole world of like performing better and, trying to achieve your best and trying to succeed. Like I remember reading his book like a long time ago, probably like the 80s or 90s. I'm dating myself when I tell you that, but I mean, yeah, and that's one of the things I remember too, that physical activation thing that he
Yes.
kind of spoke about from the very beginning. What was his first book? Awaken the Giant Within, something like
Yes.
that. Anyway, great books. He's a great guy. He's incredibly inspiring and motivating, and yeah, he's got some great principles. So I'm a big believer in that as well. Definitely use that throughout my life, getting physical, getting moving. Um, you know, and at the same time, staying calm and relaxed. If you can tie those two things together, you can really perform at a better in a better way at a higher level. Like I like that you went through that little process before the podcast. Make sure that your energy's up and that you're engaged. I mean, those are great tools and techniques to get you to perform at your best.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And so you have a couple quotes and you have popular quotes from a high performing mind. And one of the quotes is, "You're the same person 10 minutes after you fail, only wiser." What does that mean to you?
Um, so often in life, in business in particular, we're quick to discard people who make mistakes. Oh, that person screwed up. They're out of here. But like 10 minutes after that mistake, if you have the right attitude and you have an open mind and you're willing to learn from what just happened to you, you're a wiser person. You're smarter, you're wiser. I
Yes.
have this story of a friend of mine who he's in finance and he had like a company that did trading and he hired a student. And the student had a colossal screw up near the beginning. Like he lost like 40K in, some trading transaction that was expected to be pretty basic, or else he wouldn't have signed it to the student. And my buddy was telling me the story, and I'm like, oh yeah, so did you fire him after that? And he goes, are you kidding me? It cost me 40K for him to learn that lesson. Like he's like so much better now. He knows what he's doing. So there's no way I'm throwing him away now. And I just love that. He didn't fire him. It was an expensive learning experience for all concerned. Obviously, the guy was upset about it. He learned from his mistake, and he won't do that again. So that's where that quote comes from. That you're 10 minutes after you fail, you're wiser. So it helps create a more positive mindset about making mistakes, and learning from your experiences. In sport, we say losing is learning. And it's just
Yeah.
something we have ingrained in us that, like, all right, you lost, you weren't good enough on that particular day. What can you do to improve so that you better next time around? And anybody who's ever achieved greatness in anything has that mindset that,
Yeah.
you screw up, you make mistakes, you're going to learn from them, you're going to get better, you're going to recalibrate, and you're going to come back and win the next time around. And that obviously applies to, sport or business or whatever pursuit that you're in.
Yes, yes. And what that makes me think of is um I have this thing where, and I don't remember where the quote was from, but it's basically like as you're getting stronger, you feel the weakest because you work out and then you're really sore and you feel weak. As you're getting the richest, you feel the poorest because you might be investing. So then you look at your bank account and you're like, there's no money there. And then as you're getting the smartest, you feel the dumbest because you're reading these books and you might not understand the words, or it might be slow, or it might be not understanding. And the point is that you don't realize that as all the good things are happening to you, you feel the worst, which is the thing that forces you to feel inspired. So as you're failing, you're getting wiser. But we don't want to feel failure. So it's this interesting thing where it's like, hey, if you wanted to create someone really wise, they probably fail a lot. If you want to create someone really strong, you make them feel weak a lot so they can feel what the strength feels like. And it's these little things that you start to realize that as you're feeling like I'm so dumb, you're on the right path. If you feel I'm so strong, you're not on the right path. Like you need to be feeling weak to be feeling that strength growing for you. So my point
Yeah.
being here, yeah, with all of this is that you have to, it's okay to feel different feelings, but as long as you're consistently putting in the work, you're going to be improving.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, yeah, you're gonna feel like when you're working hard towards something, it doesn't feel great necessarily, but you get that success after you've done it, right? So there's this contrast between the moment you're succeeding and when you're working towards that success. You're not there yet. It doesn't feel great. You're not where you want to be. You're putting in all this time and effort. Maybe you're failing, and that doesn't feel good. But by going through that process, you learn. And it really comes down to attitude. Like if you fail, you're not necessarily going to be wiser if you're not willing to learn from your mistakes. So you got to have the right attitude, right? You got to be willing to
Yeah,
reflect a little bit, go, okay, that didn't go so good. What am I going to do next time around to make sure it does go better? Like that's the right attitude to improve and ultimately get a better result next time around. But if you're like, oh, that was them, not me, I have nothing to do with that. They screwed up, not me. And you're not willing to own it and take
yeah,
responsibility, then you're never going to get that learning opportunity and that opportunity to improve, So you got to be willing to, look at yourself and reflect a little bit and see what can you do to improve so that next time around you do get that better result. So it really does come
absolutely.
back to attitude at the end of the day. So yeah, like not discounting that quote that you had, but if you don't have the right attitude to go along with that, then
Yeah,
you're not going to enjoy the success that you're looking for at the end of the day.
exactly. And that leads to the second quote, which is accept what's going wrong. Accept what's going wrong, stay focused on what you want. And you start to
Right.
realize there, that's another one of Andrew's quotes, but you start to realize there that there's always wrong things going on.
Yeah.
But our biggest challenge is staying focused on the task at hand because there's always 1,000 people trying to ping us. There's always a bunch of emails. There's always a bunch of this. And it's how do you stay focused on the task at hand? So,
Yeah.
what are some tips and tricks you use to stay on task? Because I
I
feel like
mean,
that's so challenging.
yeah, I love that you brought up that quote. We have talked about that kind of indirectly without actually saying it. So, um, that's the fastest way to improve, by the way, because accept what's going wrong. Okay, let's say you don't. You get sidetracked into something that is like a total diversion from actually improving and working towards your goal. So like when I had that illness, if I just stayed in depression and stayed in negative thinking, then I was never going to get towards my goal of recovery, right? So
Yeah.
it by accepting what's going wrong, if you look at another good example is like professional athletes. When a professional athlete makes a mistake, they very quickly get back on track and right back focused to their goal of winning. When you if you're experienced with coaching, when you start coaching like little kids, for example, that does not happen. They go on like 10-minute tantrums of how things didn't go well. They're upset. They cry, they get discouraged, they go through this whole gambit of emotion before they finally get back. Meanwhile, the game is now almost over and it's too late and they lose. Experts at things learn how to get back on track very quickly, whether it's like a business failure, you quickly get back on track and
Yeah.
people can go and have a presentation that doesn't go well and they don't get the business, but they're quickly on to the next one. So
Yeah.
experts at whether it's sport or business or whatever pursuit you're in, if you accept what goes wrong and you quickly refocus on what you're trying to achieve, that's step number one. So, you asked earlier, how do you stay focused? It comes back also to that present moment, being focused on the task at hand. Like, as soon as I finish this interview, aside from other things that I've got to do, what can I now do to help promote this book and get it to the next level? So I'm going to be focused on that. If I kind of get into, oh no, this happened or this isn't going well, and I stay focused on that for too long, then I waste my time and I don't improve at the fastest rate that I could.
Yeah.
So when we succeed, when we want to succeed by improving more quickly, we can achieve greater levels of success because it gives us more time to achieve those greater levels of success. If you spend too much time on distractions, then you are wasting time that you could be putting towards growing your business or improving yourself or mastering your craft or whatever that is.
Yes, and a lot of the distractions they don't pay for what you're doing. And the funny thing is that a lot of people will go, I worked 12 hours today. Great, what you actually do? And you look at their schedule and you go, that's maybe an hour and a half of work because most people don't know what work is. They just think
Mm,
sitting there and switching and playing on their phone is work. And
yeah.
when really the work comes down to doing different things. And most people don't realize how fast a lot of it is. Yes, there is sometimes where it takes a long time, but there's a lot of work that is just, it does not need to take that long. And you're just saying it to make yourself prideful and feel good about what you did when in reality you know that that's not a good use of your time.
Yeah, I mean, being at work and working are two different things. Like if you spend 4 hours on your phone, you're not
Yeah.
getting anything productive done, right? So you got to. I think there's an element of efficiency in achieving greatness as well. Like if you spend a lot of time, I guess like usually. He's slightly unpopular these days, but Elon Musk does tell stories about how he slept under his desk. Like that's ultimate
Yeah.
dedication, right? So if you're ultimately dedicated to something and you're willing to not be distracted by even having to travel or waste time, rather, not so much distracted, but wasting time traveling home and back because you just want to spend every moment you can towards succeeding, it kind of illustrates a little bit why maybe he's achieved some of the levels of success in business that he has. Like him or not as a human being, you can't really take away his business success in some areas, right? He's done very well. So it's like that with everything. If the more efficient we are, the more time we apply to what we're trying to achieve, then we're going to achieve a higher level of performance and a higher level of success, and get to where we want to get to a lot more quickly.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Andrew, you have been a wealth of knowledge. Yeah, and we're kind of winding down to the end of the interview, but what do you think the audience can take away from this? What do you think is a great action step for them to do so that they can live a better, more fulfilled life?
It's a great question. I think anybody listening, if you start small, okay, start with something small. And first of all, wait, let's take a step back from that. You're going to start with something small, but first of all, you got to be really clear about what you want. So figure out what you want, make sure that the desire is there and the passion is there, and then start small. Take that first step, whether it's picking up the phone and calling somebody or sending that email or doing a little bit of research or going for a run or contacting that prospective client, whatever it is, start small. Do one, the next day, do two. Build on it slowly. Don't ask yourself to do 10 the next day because consistency is king. And if you grow it a little bit, you're more likely to sustain your momentum and sustain yourself in that effort towards achieving that particular goal.
Yeah.
So that's really step number one. And what we're doing at the same time there is we're building a little bit of discipline, and we're creating that reality that we want, that future success that we're looking for. So that's really where it starts. And the next thing I would say is be willing to look at yourself and see what's holding you back too. If there's something that's holding you back, like that needs to be addressed. So I talk about that
Yeah.
in chapter 4. You're great if you address your greatest weakness, you realize the greatest amount of improvement at the fastest possible rate.
Yeah.
So what
I
is
love it.
holding you back? If there's something obvious, like you're not willing to, cold call clients, but that's what you need to do, then you've got to find a way. Either you're going to do it or you're going to hire somebody to do it for you. So you got to find a way, whatever's holding you back, be willing to address that, and that'll help you move along a lot more quickly towards achieving your goals. And along with that, staying focused on the process and not the outcome is important. And we talked about that, accept what's going wrong, stay focused on what you want.
Absolutely.
And that really speaks to that. What steps do I need to take to succeed? Like make a to-do list. I need to, make X number of calls in a day, or I need to go to the gym and do, a particular type of training that's going to really help me perform better in my sport. Whatever it is, focus on that process. Make sure you have many different actions that will help you achieve your goals and work on them on a daily basis. So you start to span that out and attack more things. And as you do more things, you're more likely to get towards where you want to go. There's things that can derail you along the way. I talked about your greatest weakness and how addressing what's holding you back can really help you improve. But fear is another one, and then that's why
Yes.
chapter 10 is devoted to dealing with fear. If you're scared, you're too scared to do something, then it's going to be really tough. Sometimes you got to be willing to go through that fear and just say, yes, I'm scared, and what is it going to take for me to go and do it? So, like an interview, for example, if there's this interview for a job you really want, but you're too scared to go into that interview because you're afraid you're going to fail, you got to be willing to face that fear if you ever want to succeed. So one of the techniques that I teach in a high performing mind is saying yes to your fear. And I talk about how to do that in detail so that you can get into those situations, be able to work with your fear and get through it so that you can realize that success that you want on the other side of the equation.
Absolutely. And the other big thing is the other one to realize with the fear is that if you don't if you stay where you're at, it's already a no. If you go and ask, it may be a yes.
Yeah.
But you're still in the same situation that you were before, and most people don't realize how simple that is because you are still in the same spot regardless. So you might as well go try, and then cool. Maybe they're interested, maybe they're not. All good either way.
I love how you said that. You're kind of saying no if you don't act. You're right. Like, so by saying yes to your fear, you really empower yourself. It doesn't mean it's going to be any easier. I can remember doing presentations to the board of directors when I was an acting interim CEO of a company, and I was nervous, and I had to find a way to get through that. And so, anytime my nerves and fear came up, I wanted to perform well. Obviously they were judging me, whether you want to be judged or not, it happens in life, and I wanted to perform at my best. So I was scared. I said yes to my fear. I stayed focused on what I wanted to do and what I wanted to achieve. And that really helped me get through that situation. So saying yes is critical and doing it anyway. And those famous words of Nike, just do it, right? That's what we have to do
Ab-
sometimes when we are scared.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Andrew, where can people learn more about you? Where can they learn about the high performing mind as well?
Yeah, thanks for asking, Jordan. I appreciate it. So, a high performing wine can be found pretty much in any bookstore. Amazon is probably the most accessible for most. And also, my website is andrewdthompson.com. So, D is in dog. So, andrewdthompson.com. So, yeah, head on over there. I've got a bunch of videos. I'm trying to put some of these interviews up on my YouTube channel, which has about 13 followers so far. But I'm anticipating that will grow as we move along. I just launched a couple weeks back. So,
Oh, congrats.
yeah, so those are all potential avenues. Obviously I'm on some of the social media channels right now. The funny story about that in social media, I'll keep it brief, but I was always kind of against social media because it was a distraction towards sort of trying to succeed. But I've definitely needed to embrace social media through the launch of this book. So yeah, my social media followings are kind of meager at this point,
That's fine.
but
Most
yeah,
people have
it'll
fake
grow in
ones
time.
anyway.
It'll grow in time.
Well,
I'm on all the main platforms now. So yeah, there you go.
fantastic. Fantastic.